Hello everyone, this is Andrew. Welcome to Keen on America.
On July 4th, 2026, America will be 250 years old. An anniversary that will, no doubt, be greeted with a mixture of celebration, contemplation, and resignation. In Keen on America, Andrew talks not just about the American past and present, but also speculates on its future. What, Andrew asks, will be the 21st century fate of this now venerable American Republic?
Hello everybody, we're back on the subject of universities. We never really left it in America. We did a show last month with the former president of Mount Holyoke and Spelman College, Beverly Daniel Tatum, who had a new book out called Peril and Promise, College Leadership in Turbulent Times. They are indeed turbulent times. In a couple of weeks, we have a defense of the academics of tenure by Deepa Das Acevedo. And today we're talking to another college president, Arthur Levine, who's the co-author of a 2021 book, The Great Upheaval, Higher Education's Past, Present, and Uncertain Future. It's been reissued with a new afterword. And Arthur is joining us from his home in Porter Square in Cambridge. Congratulations, Arthur, on the new afterword.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
So, Arthur, you just got made president of Brandeis University. Was this the climax of your career, or is it the I don't know what the opposite of climax is? The damp squib. Did you get the long or the short straw on this one?
This one, I got the right straw, which is to say that this was an extraordinary opportunity. I'd already been a college president 3 times. This is my 3rd college presidency.
Arthur, when I see the word turbulent times, I'm always suspicious. I'm always wondering what exactly that means. From your perch as president, new president at Brandeis, are these turbulent times for universities?
These are turbulent times for everybody. We're watching all Western societies shift from national analog industrial economies to global digital knowledge economies. We're watching profound demographic change, profound economic change, profound technological change, profound global change, and profound political change. Yeah, these are turbulent times.
Arthur, you don't sound like a college president. You sound like a Silicon Valley futurist. Tell me why these are any more profound than any other time in history.
What I think is we've only had change at this scale only once before in the history of this country and the history of Britain. And that was the Industrial Revolution. And what happened was that we went through roughly the same kind of period. It was a time in which everything changed in higher education. The little church-related colleges of the period that had curriculums that developed from the Middle Ages were transformed into universities, into research institutes, into technological schools, into professional schools, into graduate schools, and what would become known as community colleges. Periods of profound, deep, unrelenting, accelerating change like this are very, very rare in any society. In the US, we've only experienced it once before.
You talk, though, Arthur, about it's only ever happened once before, but the Industrial Revolution was a series of revolutions beginning in the early 19th century and being manifested in all sorts of different chapters. Is this latest, some people call it a digital revolution of the internet and AI and many other things, is this just the latest chapter in the Industrial Revolution, or is it something new?
I think this is something new. And with the Industrial Revolution, there are essentially 2 phases. The first was one that had iron and it had coal and it had water power. The second industrial revolution was steel and electricity. And the second one was even faster than the first. But what I'd say about now is this is a fundamental break with where we've been before. And that's one of the reasons our nations are so divided. Part of the problem indeed is that those people who haven't been educated got left behind. The jobs they may have worked in industry have disappeared. There have been no programs put in place to help them. There haven't been any programs to educate them. And I think if I'd been in their shoes, I'd be very angry too. So yes, I see this as a fundamental shift with big winners and big losers.
Your book is called The Great Upheaval, Higher Education's Past, Present, and Uncertain Future. It's not a Silicon Valley futurist book. It's about universities. What's the job, Arthur, of universities historically and perhaps today? Are their job and the job of guys like you who run these big universities like Brandeis, is it to prepare people for this new world? Is it to create the new world? Or might it even be, and we'll see this perhaps in my conversation with Deepa Das Acevedo, to fight against change, to be perhaps a little bit more conservative?
The answer to your question is yes. Colleges and universities began as teaching institutions during the Middle Ages. And during the Industrial Revolution, they evolved. And what they took on in their tasks, in addition to teaching, was research and service to society. Now, what I'd say about that is the role that universities played during the Industrial Revolution, accelerating after World War II, is they became economic powerhouses for the nations that housed them. They created the research, they created the labor power, they created industry, they were innovators, and at times they were conservative and stopped change from happening. That was a good thing during the McCarthy era. That was a bad thing at other times.
When you say it was a good thing in the McCarthy era, I assume you're suggesting that they fought McCarthyism.
Yes.
So just to summarize, are you suggesting that in the 20th century, for example, higher education's business was in training and preparing and manning, and it tended to be manning rather than womaning, the legal and engineering and accounting and academic professions that formed the backbone of industrial society?
That was an important part of it, but I'd say you can't discount the research. The research in the sciences, the research in other fields. What that did was move this country forward at an extraordinary rate. And that's one of the reasons that government has historically invested in research. Universities have been engaged in innovation, in power driving the economy, and so forth.
Arthur, you mentioned McCarthyism, which was, of course, deeply anti-communist and also suspicious of the outside world. I'm not sure if it was America first, but it definitely wasn't aggressively internationalist. Do you see the role of the 20th century university, the American university? You've talked about scientific research as one rooted in a commitment to internationalism, not just to American students of different ethnicities and languages, but of bringing in students from all over the world, places like Brandeis and Harvard and MIT up the road from you?
Of course. And knowledge, given the digital era, knowledge is immediate. Knowledge can't be contained. And as a consequence, knowledge has become global. There are no more secrets. There are no things that can be essentially hidden away from populations, even in countries that try to limit it. There are other ways to get it.
How do you explain then this turn against the internationalist university? You only have to go online to read about a certain Donald Trump's war with Harvard or Columbia or Princeton or Yale, UC Berkeley, Stanford, all the leading universities, Brandeis, of course. Why has there been this populist reaction against the university, against these places of scientific and intellectual research in an age when, as you said, it's very hard to fight globalism? You have to really be King Canute and stand on the beach and imagine or pretend that you can stop the waves.
It's what I said before. We are deeply divided, and the basis for that division is the educational level. The voters who voted for Donald Trump tend to be on the lower half of the educational level, and those who voted against him on the higher level. Another way to describe this is we're divided between the people who've won in the transition to a global digital knowledge economy and those people who lost. And for those who lost, I would be really, really angry. I would distrust every social institution. And we live in a time in which, if that's what I believe, I can find media that'll reinforce it. So in times of divisions, in times of very different experiences, very different opinions, it's possible to be isolated into communities that do that. In populist eras, what always happens is that our elite institutions are under attack. And the difficulty today is that when the attack occurred during the populist administration of Andrew Jackson in the 1830s and 1820s, it didn't matter so much because we couldn't do as much damage to each other. Today, we can do great damage. One of the things that occurs to me in terms of this age, there was a group in Britain called the Luddites, which in the late 1700s were opposed to the opening of factories because they believed that it would ruin their industries. It would ruin crafts, it would ruin artisans. So they decided the best remedy was to blow up the factories. So Britain hung them. What stopped the blowing up of factories were three things. Thing number one was there were too many factories to blow up. There were thousands. Then what happened was it turned out that the goods that were made at factories were much cheaper than the goods they made. So they were now accessible to them. And it turned out on top of that, the factories would hire them and pay them much better wages than they would have made as artisans. Where we are now is between two worlds. The world that ended the Luddite Rebellion and the world that promoted the Luddite Rebellion. People who want to reclaim yesterday and people who want to move into tomorrow. And
yes. Yesterdays and tomorrows, we've done many shows on that. In fact, my last book was entitled that. I've done lots of shows on Luddite. So coming back to the university, some people might say, Arthur, that whatever happened to the American dream in the 20th century? Anyone could go to Brandeis. You just needed to study hard at school. And if you were able to discipline yourself and win scholarships, you could go to any university in America. Why should we be concerned then with the losers in the new system that you described? These are people who are lazy, perhaps, who have taken too many drugs, or who spend all their time on Instagram or Facebook. They deserve what they get, some people might suggest.
I wouldn't be one of those people to suggest that. I'm talking about people who worked hard all of their lives, who had pension plans, whose factories closed, who lost their jobs, who lost their pensions, who lost their dreams. They didn't do anything wrong. The world changed around them. And we ought to be concerned about those people because it's the right thing to do. We ought to also be concerned about those people because if we want to perpetuate a democratic society, we need for them to be participants in it.
How much does it cost, Arthur, to go to Brandeis, where you're the president?
It depends upon your family income.
Well, what's the cover price? What's the sticker?
The cover price is $70,000. However, we meet full need. So if your family makes below a certain level, you pay nothing.
So below what? So let's be more specific here. What do you have to earn below to get a free ride?
I think that's not what matters. What does matter is this, that whatever your family makes, we will provide the additional revenue that you need in order to be able to support this education. If you need everything, we'll give you everything. If you need nothing, we'll give you nothing.
But you know, Arthur, better than I do, that's not really how the system works. We've done whole shows on how wealthy people seem to take advantage of the system. Coming back to universities, I want to pick on Brandeis because it's just one of many high quality, but also incredibly expensive universities. I've just sent 2 kids through universities, one at NYU and one at Bryn Mawr. I'm all too aware of the cover price of these things. Aren't you the problem in their minds? You're charging, I mean, to go to a good 4-year college now, if you don't get help, it's going to cost you close to $500,000. So you're part of the problem, not the solution.
I guess I don't see that for this reason.
I don't mean Brandeis. I don't want to just focus on Brandeis, but you're the president there. But it's still, broadly, you got to have a lot of money to be able to go to college these days.
I think the cost of college, I would like it to be less, okay? But I think there are a fair number of schools that do what we do. They provide aid to students to enable them to afford it. Part of what's important in higher education is not only access, that is getting into college, which we didn't allow for Jews and blacks and women in earlier times, but also choice. You want to get into the institution that best fits the kinds of abilities and skills that you have. That was what the 1947 President Truman's report said. We just never adopted it.
So how do you convince people it's worth it, the sticker price? Okay, I acknowledge that often you get help, but it requires a significant investment of time, 4 years, and often a significant investment of money. In an age today where AI, for example, seems to be undermining a lot of the traditional disciplines of the 20th century, law and engineering and even computer programming, what's the point of college?
What I'd argue is that, as I said before, we're living in a knowledge economy. The fact of the matter is that a college education is not enough, which is why we transformed the Brandeis curriculum, but it's essential. The kinds of jobs that pay good salaries require post-secondary education, even if it's welding or it's automotive repair. They require post-secondary education.
What do you make of the German system where welders, for example, don't go to university? I'm not sure if they go to university here. I'm not sure if you can major in welding in an American university. But in Germany, there's much more of an apprentice education system where you graduate high school and then you might choose to train as a welder or perhaps even a plumber or an electrician. But it doesn't require the kind of investment of time and money that American universities require.
You can graduate with a welding degree from a community college and some regional universities. But what comes to mind looking at the German system, which I really love, I love it for 2 reasons. There are 2 tracks. There's vocational technical and there's traditional academic. What's wonderful about it is that you can choose the vocational technical, and as you move along in your career as a plumber, as an electrician, you can decide, my career would really be advanced if I took some management, maybe if I took engineering. And there are tracks between the 2 systems First, we don't have two systems. And second, the track between them is essential, or else you have kids making up their minds what they want to do for the rest of their lives at 16.
You're presenting education in a fairly utilitarian way, but I know you don't really, I don't think, mean that. At Brandeis, you've reformed the system, you've developed a new plan to reinvent liberal arts. You suggest that this plan will maintain liberal arts education as a critical component of a forward-looking society. I'm assuming that the value, in your mind at least, and perhaps at Brandeis, of a liberal arts education isn't purely utilitarian. It isn't just to prepare you for the world of work. It's also to educate you in beauty, in justice, and the other big words in the liberal education curriculum.
Let me say this. The historian and journalist Henry Adams, he had two progenitors who were president of the United States, wrote about his education at Harvard in the mid-19th century. And what he said was that he received an 18th century education for a world plunging into the 20th century. There are times in which the world changes quickly and higher education lags behind. So in terms of the liberal arts have to teach life skills, durable skills like communication. They have to teach things like problem solving. They have to teach things like critical thinking. But that's not enough anymore. Students are going to go into careers. And those careers require a whole different sets of skills beyond those that are more temporal. Let's call those career skills. Let's call those job skills. At Brandeis, we're going to create competencies in those areas. And what we're going to do is create a second transcript and record them when students achieve them, so we can send them to employers. We'll be able to send employers notification of the durable skills, the life skills that students achieve through the liberal arts, supplemented or enriched by those career skills.
I'm not sure you've sold me, certainly on 80 grand a year for that. Can't you just learn that online? Can't you just go on ChatGPT or Anthropic and learn this stuff these days? Or simply talk to your parents or your friends? I mean, what exactly does it mean to have a life skill? And why do you have to go to university? Isn't life itself the only way to learn life skills, to go out in the world and work? Perhaps not work, succeed, fail? Isn't the world itself really a university? And it's free, Arthur. It doesn't cost 80 grand a year.
So when you sent your kids to those elite schools, why'd you do it? They could have learned it on the street. They could have learned it by talking to you. They could have learned it online. Why did you waste 4 years of their lives and a lot of your money if what you said is correct?
It's a good question, and it's something that I've often scratched my head on. Let me give the example of my two kids. My son, who went to NYU, actually used New York as his university. I don't think he ever went to any classes, but he seemed to have matured by simply being somewhere else. My daughter at Bryn Mawr was much more academic. So they're different types of kids. But I think that's a question, in all seriousness, that many parents are asking themselves. I mean, I assume you talk to parents all the time. You're having to convince them. Do you have kids yourself?
Of course. And my kids went to schools like your kids. And the reason is, when people think about learning online, they're thinking about those other kids, not my kids, those other kids. And the reality right now is that if you think of the traditional college student, somewhere between 18 to 24, attending full-time and living near or on campus, that's less than 1/5 of all college students. The truth of the matter is, what we're doing is developing two college systems, one for the wealthy, as you described it before, one for your kids and my kids, and for those people who are working, who have kids, who are going part-time. What we're doing is developing online universities. Those two systems need to be intertwined so that wealth isn't a division between those who are forced to go online and those who can have a full-time person-to-person education. And that's why financial aid is so very, very important.
But do you need to still keep college exclusive? I mean, there are always these best college reports. I think they just came out. They seem to have an impact, or perhaps in some ways less impact than others, certainly because they're quite controversial. Some colleges have even opted out of that. Are you in favor in this great upheaval, Arthur, of maintaining the exclusivity of college? There are people in Silicon Valley who simply argue that with the digital revolution, nothing is exclusive anymore. Everyone should have the same access to a wise professor at Harvard or Brandeis or MIT. Why keep the walls up? Why not just blow the whole thing down?
There are two very, very different experiences. One experience is spending 4 years full-time on a campus with the professors. President James Garfield in 1880 was asked the ideal college. And his answer was Mark Hopkins, who was the 19th century president of Williams, on one end of a log and a student on the other. We offer that kind of education, and maybe there are 1,000 students on the other end of the log. We offer a much more individualized education, and that's a stronger kind of education. And that's why it's important that we make it affordable for people who couldn't afford it themselves. That's a matter of equity. That's a matter of fairness. It's a matter of rightness.
But it's also a matter still of winners and losers. I take your point that the system now is geared towards the wealthy, and that if you're a smart kid from a poor family, it's harder and harder to make something of oneself. But in your 21st century system, your ideal system, there's still going to be winners and losers, aren't there? There's still going to be graduates of Harvard Law School or Brandeis or Yale or Stanford or Berkeley who will go on to lead the world. And there'll be people who will struggle to find work. There'll still be poverty. So you're still going to have the anger of the underclass, aren't you?
What happens in times like the present, times of transformation, the income redistribution in the short run is terrible. What happens is a very small number of people have a disproportionate share of the wealth, and a very large number of people have a disproportionate share of the poverty. With time, as we move toward that global digital knowledge economy, new jobs, new income strands, all of that will become available. However, the issue is now. What do we do now? American higher education has a 3-tier system. The first, which was invented in California. The first tier is elite higher education, and that's the uniform University of California system. It takes the top 12.5% of all students. The next level is the Cal State system, which takes a third. And the next level is community colleges, which are universal. That's the system we built in the United States. I suspect what will happen is that we'll see institutions like Arizona State. Arizona State is a fascinating case which broke that model. What it said was, we can take anybody. And you know what? We can be a top research university, and we can graduate those students at the same rate that other more selective institutions do. And I think that's going to be the model for public universities in the future. However, places like Brandeis, in which we have, it's a small place. There are under 5,000 students. The faculty include Nobels and people who've won other kinds of prizes. What we're clearly doing is educating a smaller number of that population. We're not a public university. I wish we could offer this experience to everybody, but we can't.
Have there been political mistakes for the university in the 20th century, especially the late part of the 20th century? Trump's war on the elite universities, on the Ivies, is a populist one against what he calls woke education. I have a friend, a nameless friend at Brandeis, who works, I think, in your women's studies department. Of these big universities have women's studies and ethnic studies and many other studies which have angered populists. Do you think that this was a mistake for higher education? As the new president of Brandeis, do you want to make education more mainstream, less niche, less ideological, perhaps even less left-wing?
I don't think education is far left-wing. What I think is happening is that's a wonderful excuse to attack universities, which are being attacked because they're intellectual, because they're perceived as elite, not because they're left-wing. What I'd say is universities have all kinds of fields. We have Southeast Asian studies. Should we get rid of that? We have Latin American studies. Should we drop that? What about Mideastern studies? How about studying the Middle Ages? Should we drop that? We have periods that we study and populations that we study. Anthropology is based upon that. And if we start denying fields and claim that they shouldn't exist in a university, what we're doing is we're destroying inquiry, we're destroying the chance for us to truly understand, to truly study, to truly advance. When you look at the word woke was originally created in the late 40s and early 50s. And what it meant was people who understood the plight of the poor, particularly blacks. That's a word that's been corrupted in recent times. I won't defend the term woke. I won't defend the opposition to woke, but I think it's the wrong battle. The right battle is, where do we want our country to go into the future? What skills and knowledge do we need to do it? What kinds of research do we need to make it happen? By blinding ourselves, by limiting our capacity to do this, we create a situation in which we reduce our research, we reduce our education, we reduce our training. If another nation did this to us, we'd consider it an act of war.
What about ideological purity, though? There have been all sorts of studies suggesting that the vast majority of university professors, especially at the top schools, are liberal or progressive, certainly pro-Democrat, anti-Trump, anti-MAGA, anti-populist. Do you think, as a president of a large, or certainly an influential, prestigious university, you have a responsibility to make sure that there's an ideological balance amongst your professors?
What I feel is universities have to be open to all opinions unless they cause damage or hurt people. Now, what I'd say is I believe in university neutrality. I think that universities cannot take a stand on issues. I don't even know what it means when universities take stances on issues. Does it mean the faculty think that? The board thinks that? The president thinks that? What's it mean? The students think that? I have no idea. In order for universities to be forums for all ideas, all ideologies, it's critical that they be neutral in terms of the ideologies they express. It's also critical that the people that we hire not be hired on the basis of their ideology or their politics. That does damage to a university.
Final question, Arthur. The current administration seems to be maybe not literally declaring war with Harvard, but certainly declaring war on higher education more broadly, discouraging international students, getting involved with on-campus protests, particularly on Middle Eastern politics. Are you seeing its impact in your day-to-day management of a prestigious university like Brandeis, or is it a lot of just froth of headlines that people like Donald Trump seem to create? Is it actually having an impact on the universities today?
It's having an impact on universities in several kinds of ways. One way is that international students are being denied visas. Another way is that when international students speak up, they have a chance of being deported. Another thing that's happened is support for research is being cut. Using certain words in a research proposal will get it denied. Words that were perfectly acceptable for decades and decades and decades. In essence, what this is doing is censoring the research. What it's doing is limiting the number of people who can attend universities. And what it's doing is isolating the United States and the world.
No, that's bad news. I don't think anyone would defend that. Arthur Levine is the new president at Brandeis University. He's the co-author of a 2021 book, The Great Upheaval, Higher Education's Past, Present, and Uncertain Future. It's coming now with a new afterword. A wonderful conversation, Arthur. I appreciate it. If I'd sent my kids to Brandeis, I would ask for my money back, but I don't think I can do that. I wouldn't even have the cheek to do that. Keep doing your good work.
Well,
and
who knows if they even would have graduated?
Yeah, they probably would. They wouldn't have got in. I mean, that's why they had to go to NYU and Bryn Mawr because they couldn't get into Brandeis.
Listen, I love talking to you. This is one of the most fun interviews I've done in a long time.
I bet you tell all the girls that, Arthur, don't you?
Nah, you're not a girl.